name's Clifford Kaufman. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm a percussionist educator and an interviewer as well. I started Clif Chats, this live interview show, as a way to connect with people. Started at the beginning of the pandemic and just learn from creative people and hopefully offer some value to other people. So I'd like to introduce. Also, if you would mind sharing this, that helps to get it out to more people as well. So I'd like to introduce Dame Evelyn Glennie. She's the first person in history to create and sustain a full-time career as a solo percussionist and has performed worldwide with the greatest orchestras and artists and is a double Grammy winner. She grew up in a farm in Scotland and was influenced by traditional Scottish music. When she was 8 years old, her hearing declined, but she still went on to become a proficient pianist and later was introduced to percussion at age 12. And she eventually studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London at the age of 16. And she studied percussion and piano there. She has worked with diverse artists from different genres: pop, jazz, folk, classical, and contemporary music, and has collaborated with artists such as Bjork, Bela Fleck, Bobby McFerrin, Mark Knopfler, and many more. And she also had a prominent role in the opening ceremony of the London 2012 Olympic Games. She conducts master classes and consultations to inspire the next generation of musicians. And she says listening is the backbone to every aspect of our lives. She has a great TED Talk, which is how I originally discovered her, called How to Truly Listen, and I'll post a link to that. She also has a podcast, and her mission is to teach the world to listen. And she says, my career and my life have been about listening in the deepest possible sense. Losing my hearing meant learning how to listen differently, to discover features of sound I hadn't realized existed. Losing my hearing made me a better listener. I am going to now bring her on. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm very well, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. I just was introducing you, and I was mentioning that I first discovered you through your TED Talk, and I'm sure a lot of people have. Am I loud enough? Or can you hear me okay? Because I can't hear myself very well. Just wanted to make sure.
You're good for me. I can see you as long as I can see you. You're
okay.
absolutely
Got
fine.
it. Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
that's great.
Yeah. So I first discovered you through your TED Talk, and anyway, and I think in the TED Talk you said that you followed Herbie Hancock. Is that correct?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think if I can remember, it's so long ago, but he was either before me, which I think was the case, or else immediately after me.
Uh-huh.
But nevertheless, I remember being enthralled by what he did. And I think it was before me because I thought, oh my God, this is a hard act to follow.
Uh-huh.
So, but yes, I mean, he was just extraordinary, and the whole occasion was amazing, and it was very new to me, of course, at the time.
Yeah, and I remember I noticed all of his equipment was right next to you, and so that had to be really exciting, I would think. I was wondering, is there anything that you've been listening to or that you listen to in general that might surprise people?
Oh my goodness, my listening repertoire is actually very small. And funnily enough, I don't really get involved too much with music out with what I need to be doing.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I find that it's very much overload. And so I definitely need this real division between when I deal with sound as a profession and when I just have that cut off. And that's really important to me. So I don't use music as a hobby. I don't listen to music just, to have there or anything like that. Um, and so anything that I do engage with is normally in a live situation, so that basically, all your senses are being fed, and you just have that something extra. The presence is somehow different, when you're in that live situation, watching another performer or groups or whatever. So that's really the time that I engage with something whereby I may not be participating in as an actual player myself. A lot of those occasions actually come if I happen to be performing at that place at the same time. So it could be watching a rehearsal of something, or the rest of the program, and if they're rehearsing that. So I quite like to see the kind of inner workings of things. And, that interests me just because I'm so familiar with that myself, as indeed I'm sure many of you who are, engaging in this conversation are. And because I think that's the interesting point, is how we actually kind of oil the engine and what goes on behind the scenes. But of course, a lot of that is exposed through YouTube nowadays, or our social medias or whatever. But I don't really like putting that part forward.
Okay. I was listening to your podcast. We were just talking briefly beforehand with Jacob Cullen,
Yeah.
and one thing that really impressed me. Well, I thought I really enjoyed your questions, but also your listening, the way that you listened, and the way that it appeared you're in the moment. Is that something that has come naturally, or is that something that you've developed?
Well, to be honest, I think possibly it's something that has been necessary simply because, as a farmer's daughter growing up in the northeast of Scotland, I was, along with my two brothers, given responsibilities and jobs on the farm at a very young age. And so you're surrounded by machinery, by livestock, and so on, and by nature, of course. And so a lot of that is being aware, and your parents are trusting you to be around these things and to do certain things, and so on. And I think that that's all about listening. When one of my jobs was to look after sick lambs, and really weak lambs, and basically, if that wasn't about listening, and then I don't know what was. You're listen to every kind of teeny little nuance and movement and whatever of that little body, and then seeing that improve and get stronger, and so on. And I mean, a lot of it is just also about patience. That's possibly the one thing I've learned most of all about is just patience. That just don't expect things to just happen miraculously. I always worry about seeing videos online saying, triple your speed, hand speed in 20 minutes or something. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's amazing. However, the reality is, if you want a kind of longer career, first of all, listen to the body. And in my case, I find that, I'm 5'2". I'm not the tallest person on the planet. And there are certain things that I know, because of the height I am, that no matter how much I practice, how many hours more I do something may not work. And it's quite simply down to the physical aspects of what I have available. So it's really listening to the machine. So to answer your question, I think it's possibly always been there, but for different reasons, it's been nurtured in different ways.
And as far as listening, I guess a different sort of listening would be listening to yourself, and also being comfortable with yourself. What has been your evolution in becoming more? I mean, you seem very comfortable as yourself, and I'm just curious about your process and what that's been like.
Well, I think if I could say anything positive about myself, it would be the fact that I am quite good at listening to myself. So I'm quite just sort of, all I can do is listen to myself. This is what I have, ba-bom. And we all have a story to tell, and we all, have something to give, and something unique to give based on what we have available and our experiences and our journeys and so on. So, and because I'm not so distracted by other things that are happening around me, it means that I'm absolutely focused on what is happening at this moment. I have to be. That's what has to happen with me. And so really, I think that that's always been something that I felt has been an advantage for me, because it does allow you to just simply concentrate on what needs to be done at that point in time and how you want to do it, knowing that it can always change. It can change minute by minute. You have that permission. But ultimately, in order to resonate, you know, with objects and music and compositions and whatever it must be, you need to resonate within yourself as well. So it's not a religious thing or a Zen-like thing or a New Agey thing or anything like that. It's just quite simply, well, this is what kind of happens, and everything needs to be really simplified.
Uh-huh. Are you or have you been a meditator at any time in your life?
Am I a meditator?
Yes.
Um, well, not consciously, but what I do a lot, I find myself certainly doing. I think as I get older as well, I seem to be doing more and more. Is just needing that time to myself. I've always enjoyed being on my own, and I've enjoyed traveling on my own, and most of the time, and living on my own and being with nature and that kind of thing. I enjoy that, and I think that I need that time to kind of be by myself. And so that could mean just quite simply sitting or standing looking out the window. I probably spend about 2 hours, if I'm at home, a night just kind of looking out the window into kind of darkness, more or less, seeing the odd sort of deer or something move around, or a badger or whatever. And but it's not a kind of, oh, I need to have this, or I need to think about such and such a thing. It's just thinking about nothing in particular. It's just whatever comes into your head. But it's a necessary kind of thing. And I do feel that that moment of listening to yourself is an absolutely necessary activity that we can all engage with in a way that feels right for yourself.
Uh-huh. So you, when you're, observing outside or listening, are you following your thoughts in a very non-judgmental way and just letting them go wherever they go? Like, what is that like?
Yeah, definitely. Just, think about nothing in particular, no agenda, no analysis, nothing at all, unless you feel you want to do that. It can be having a conversation with yourself, or it can just be thinking about something. It could be think about maybe what you've done during that day, or what, the activities that have happened, or it could be thinking about, a particular thing that needs to be done, or just really nothing in particular. And I think that's why it's so precious, because it's the one thing in one part of the day whereby you don't have a list, as it were, and you're ticking all of these things off. So you can just literally let things happen how they naturally do.
So do you feel like you have a good balance at this point? I mean, I know things are always changing, but between work and relaxation, and have you figured out some ways of, giving yourself that? Because I know sometimes you might have some projects and it might be stressful and you might have a lot of.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important point. I mean, I remember when I reached about the age of 40, and I was at a real crossroads in a way. A lot had happened before. I felt that, I was struggling to see, right, now what sort of thing. Things had been established more or less, and so it was just literally this crossroads. And throughout our career, you encounter several crossroads, as it were, but this was a fairly major one. But one of the things that was extremely clear to me was that I was simply doing too much, and I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and that wasn't helping the clarity in sort of viewing this crossroads and weighing things up. And however, what it did do was that it made me sit at my kitchen table with my diary, and I literally opened it up and I said to myself, right, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And I just went through it like that. And most of the things were, no, you don't need to do this. You really don't need to do these things. And so it was a case of weeding out the diary as you would your garden. And suddenly I could see the projects that truly mattered, whereby you felt you could truly make a difference. And that was really important to me, because up to that point I felt so guilty if I had a free afternoon or a free morning or a free weekend or something. I thought, oh, I've got to fill it up and things. And so after that period, which was possibly the most important thing I've ever done, it meant that a free morning or afternoon or whatever was absolutely necessary. I got rid of all weekend meetings and all weekend rehearsals, unless it happened to be with an orchestra or an ensemble or something that simply could not be changed. But just individual rehearsals, this sort of thing with maybe one or two other people, just absolutely almost the weekends became, no, that is my time really. So I found myself being really stalwart with that. And that was so important. And with COVID, of course, everything fell like a pack of cards. And in a way, it gave me a real chance to literally wake up in my own bed every single day, create some sort of routine during the day. And I loved that. I really, really liked that. So that when concerts just slowly began to kind of sort of sprout from the calendar last September or something, I felt so, yeah, now I'm ready to play, but not too much. And so I think that for me, it's definitely just learning to get this balance. But that's not to say that I'm going to make the same mistake again, of course.
With the beginning of COVID, it just all so many of us who were freelancers, cleared.
Yeah.
Do you mind talking a little bit about how you did structure your day, or how that evolved into what your day maybe is like now?
Absolutely. I mean, basically, I managed to do was to keep the office here open, basically, and so it meant that some staff worked from home and some still were able to come here, and we just sort of restructured the times that we came in so that not too many people were in at the same time, and that was important. Obviously, we couldn't have any visitors or anything like that, so everything turned virtual more or less. And so it opened up the possibilities of doing virtual consultations, virtual um, school workshops and talks and Q&As and all sorts of things. And I found that I was doing things for primary schools, secondary schools, high schools, colleges, community groups that often I would not have necessarily done because it might have been in some far-flung place, in a remote place or something in maybe the US or Canada or Europe or Australia or New Zealand. And so that was really, really interesting for me. And the demographic really expanded quite a bit. It also gave me a chance to compose more. And so I was able to compose a couple of film projects, and also just one or two pieces, shorter pieces for the concert platform, and other bits and pieces in that kind of category. But what was important for me as the kind of percussion player, not the musician, but the percussion player, was right. What am I going to do with my body, basically? Because I wasn't interested in learning repertoire just for the sake of learning repertoire, because my whole life is about learning repertoire, and I really didn't want to do that. It just didn't interest me at all. But I basically had a chance to catalogue the over 3,500 instruments we have here in the collection. And what that did was that each month I was able to pick an instrument that maybe I had never played before or I hadn't played in a long time. And each month I'd choose a different instrument and only concentrate on that instrument. So, for example, the first month in lockdown, I concentrated on the Irish Boron and discovered that it was about 30 years ago since I last played the Boron, very much in the Irish traditional style. And suddenly this instrument has expanded and developed in such an incredible way. The whole technique, the single stick end of playing, the types of borons, you name it. I discovered that there's a very interesting boron maker very close to where this office is here in Cambridgeshire. And there are all sorts of things that I discovered, and it was fascinating. And then the next month was something like the musical Bone Spoons. And so again, this was just expanded in so many ways. And the spoons have taken me all around the world, with the Turkish spoons, Russian spoons, with the folk music type of spoons, with all sorts of spoons. And then it was something like the tabla, and then getting into really concentrating on congas, on bongos, on all sorts of things like that. And it was such a great way to keep the physical body supple, alive, different muscle groups being used. It was just such an interesting journey from a percussionist point of view, from a musician's point of view, a sound creator, just for your own curiosity as well. So, and that's something that, I don't now have the chance to do that because the projects are coming in again. But it is something I want to just sort of keep bubbling. And all of those things that I did during lockdown, I'm just sort of keeping almost spinning like plates.
Uh, it's funny. I was talking to my mom earlier, and I was saying that being a self-employed musician, being in business for myself, is like spinning plates. Because if you neglect one plate, it's going to fall and break, or at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important thing for students to um, be aware of, and for people to really talk about that in our music institutions and our establishments, because it's the one area that can be, it can be such a confusing thing sometimes, and you almost have to see that aspect just as you do your practice, really kind of devote X amount of time to that, or whatever it might be. But yes, it is an important part.
So it sounds like it wasn't difficult to structure your day even after the calendar, had cleared due to COVID. And so how much time would you spend on instruments?
How much time would I spend on the instruments?
Yeah.
Oh,
How much time would you spend playing and practicing?
yeah, well, I mean, a bit like the time I spend on my own in the evenings. There was no kind of agenda to that, because what was so interesting about it was that I did not have to prepare anything for a particular date or event or time. And that was the difference. So this was literally because I wanted to do it, and I just simply wanted to enjoy the process without putting any kind of pressure on myself at all. And so if I felt like it, I would do it. If I didn't feel like it, I wouldn't do it. If there was time to do it, I would do it. And obviously there was a lot of time. And that was, I probably, I mean, if I really had to kind of look back, I'd probably say maybe 3, 4, 5 hours or something like that a day I would have spent doing something or another, not necessarily practice. And I didn't want the practice to feel, pressurized or hard or
Rigid.
no, it just kind of, it needed to be a truly enjoyable process. Thankfully, I enjoy practicing anyway, most of the time, but nevertheless, this needed to be completely non-pressurized, because I think once COVID happened, it almost felt like a sabbatical for me, because there was just no queuing up for stuff at airports, there was no dealing with visas, there was no checking schedules and contracts and all of this kind of thing. It was, you're just completely free of that. And it just felt great for a while, it really, really did. And when there's been such a vast change in people's lives, you really do then see, how much energy is spent into is given into a particular activity like the admin side. Even if you've got people doing things, you still ultimately got to check all of this yourself.
Yeah. And I want to definitely talk about uh, business, your approach to that, also more about the creative side and how you balance those two. But before we do that, I want to just still talk a little bit about exploring these instruments. I'm just curious, when you explore an instrument that you haven't played in 30 years, or that you've maybe never played, it sounds like you're not, I'm guessing you're not looking up tutorials at all. You're more just approaching it like, okay, what can I get from this instrument? What sounds? What You're just exploring it. Is that correct? So you're not necessarily trying to learn a traditional technique or that sort of thing, or is there a time when you are or have done that as well?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both actually, because I mean I'm of the generation whereby I'm pre YouTube and social media to then having you know, to get to grips with all of that, and then seeing what it can actually give, and what your relationship is with that kind of thing. I think instinctively more of an individual whereby I just like to fish around myself as regards to what an instrument can do. And so the sound aspect is really important. And then however I manipulate that, that's just kind of, well, that's fine. However, there are certain things whereby you know that there's immense technique into playing something when you think about tabla and so on. And when you look on the internet at the mountain of videos that there are, thankfully, I feel as though I've had the experience to know which ones are kind of, yeah, that's maybe one to gravitate to, and maybe that's not one to gravitate to. You know enough about the basics of the techniques to see where something is coming from. And that's really important, because there are, dare I say, you know, not meaning to be critical, but there are videos out there that people are meaning well, but perhaps if you were to follow them, you know, to the word, you're going to end up in some problems, whether it's physical problems, or you may get so far and then you just come to a bit of a block. So I think I'm fairly okay at sussing out, you know, those that are absolutely genuinely, yes, they know exactly what they're talking about. And but ultimately it's important to talk to people face to face, and you know, to just get different kinds of perspectives of the people who do play those instruments. So I think it's a bit of both, really. I mean, I couldn't, well, or what I did find that I needed to be careful of during lockdown was, because I was looking at these videos, I thought, gosh, it's so easy to get sucked into the videos, and you're almost constantly feeding yourself with stuff, with information and with ideas and all of this kind of thing. And yes, that's fine. However, it's going back to the listening again. It's right, what's going on inside here, you know, and inside your head and your body, and what is working for you. So it's so important for me to bring the technique to my body rather than forcing my body, you know, into a technique and trying to make that happen. It goes back to, right, what attributes do you have? You know, I'm fairly short. I happen to have short arms, so there are certain things that I set up in a way in order to suit my physical body. Someone who's maybe 6 foot might do it completely differently, and it's absolutely right for them. So it's this kind of thing again. Just be aware of what you're feeding yourself, and what feels right within yourself as well.
Yeah. Did you end up being teachers or for specific instruments?
No, actually, no. Not well. I say no. Well, sort of no. How can I clarify this? Basically, with the Boron, what was interesting was that I was in contact with a wonderful Boron player, Irish Boron player, Cormac Byrne, and he's doing a PhD on Boron playing. And so we had this kind of reciprocal agreement whereby I would be his mentor for his PhD, and he would give me, you know, some sessions on the Boron, and that was fantastic. And so, you know, when we were allowed during COVID, I went to see him at a local folk festival. It's quite a nice folk festival close by, and you know, just seeing him in action with the band and all sorts of things, and just having the conversations with them, and sharing some techniques, and you know, that was really fascinating, and really inspiring, and it just kind of made me think that, my God, we do need this face-to-face engagement, you know, to really keep that inspiration going. There's just such a different vibe that happens, you know, when you are in the same room with somebody. So that's the only thing that's happened there. And then not, well, maybe when was it? November, I think, last year, there was a project that we did here called Drumathon, and basically it was for children in need, and this is a national BBC thing that happens. And so something like 100 drummers or something came together at the studios, the BBC studios in Manchester, and it was amazing to be in the room with so many drummers and just learning from them, some Indian players and kit players or drum set players and samba players and you name it. And it was just soaking the whole thing up and just learning basically.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, doing Clif chats. I started this at the beginning of the lockdown, the pandemic, and it was a way to connect and really helped me get through it in a lot of ways. Being very, very isolated for the most part, besides my family. Um,
Yeah.
but once I finally was around people, it was like, oh, holy, stuck into what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope you'll keep going with these chats because you're so good at it,
Thank
but B, it's just a wonderful thing that you can bring and you give to people. So yeah, well
Well,
done
thank you.
you.
Well, and so you started a podcast. I'm curious, what are some things you've learned about interviewing and talking to people through the podcast?
Well, what I've learned is that you're far better at it than I am.
No, I don't think so.
You're so natural at it. Basically, we started the podcast before COVID, actually, so it wasn't a COVID related activity, and we had them face to face here or just upstairs, and I was basically I wanted to have a whole range of guests, so not only musicians but comedians and actors, actresses, sports people, presenters, you name it. And so yes, we started those, and then we uh, began releasing them really at the start of COVID, but it wasn't because of COVID. It just so happened that was the time. And then, of course, they all had to end up being virtual thereafter.
Mhm.
And what I learned was that it's far more difficult than I thought being the interviewer than the interviewee.
Mm.
And so a lot of research had to go into each guest. And yes, I found it really quite difficult, to be honest. I found it really quite difficult to, um, yeah, ask a question, keep a conversation going. Um, I don't know. It's hard to really explain because when people see someone like yourself doing it so effortlessly, they think, well, that must be quite easy. But actually, I find it quite difficult, and I still do, even although there's a teeny bit of improvement. But it doesn't come wholly naturally for me.
Uh-huh. What what have been some things that you've gotten out of the interviews?
I think it's realizing that everybody is a human being. So, if I think about Bill Bailey, he's a wonderful British comedian and he's also an excellent musician and he uses music in his comedy routines. And he's a really clever guy. And I felt, oh my God, what am I going to say to him? You know, but I found that actually he was a really serious person, and how he constructs his comedy routines is just in a way like a piece of music. He's an observer and he practices. He puts this composition together, a comedy composition together. He tries it out on his family and friends and sort of observes the comments and tweaks at it and his relationship with an audience and so on is it is absolutely crucial for him. And if they're not responding or not laughing or something, this is disastrous for him. And so it's kind of the what I learned was that everybody goes through this journey. We might only see the end product of it, and oh, they must always be funny, or they must always love what they do, and so on. But people really have this kind of roller coaster of a journey before they get to the point of the activity that we see as a member of the public.
Mhm.
And with Bill, he was saying that it takes him about 2 years to form one sketch. Well, that's a long time, but you can almost see why when you're talking to him, and it's just like practicing. I'm not going to learn a concerto in a week. I just don't have that capacity. I really don't, and I'm not even going to do it in 3 months. So it's you just have that journey, and it's very interesting seeing that everybody really is in the same kind of boat, even if they're in a slightly different discipline.
Oh, that's great. Uh, Joyce Johnson, who's in the United States, she said or asked, "Do you teach others how to do this kind of observation and listening, and what does that look like?"
Well, it's kind of interesting because I'm not sure if I teach it or not, to be honest. I don't sort of see it as, oh, this is something I box up or put in a bottle and there it is. I think for me, it's more about individuals asking their own questions and for me to encourage them to ask questions about what they're doing. That's what I do in my own situation. I just simply ask questions. Well, what if I do this? What if I try that? Oh, what if I add this? Or oh, what if I try this type of sticking or this type of mallet or whatever it is? It just kind of is this constant kind of, discovery really. And, and that kind of hauls out all sorts of other things, things, discoveries that you had no idea existed, or ways of manipulating something to get something out of what you're thinking. And it's having the courage to do that and the permission to do that. We all have permission to do it. It's just do it kind of thing. And a lot of that is about listening, So it's not about, well, thinking, oh, no one else does this, or oh, I haven't seen anybody else do this, or it doesn't say that in this book, in the tutor book or method book or whatever, or well, my teacher hasn't mentioned that, so is it right, is it wrong? Just do it, just do it and try. And this really gives you confidence to move forward with the nurturing of your experiments in a way. So you're like a scientist, constantly adding this and adding that and seeing what's going to kind of explode really, and or what color it might end up being. And that's the fun bit, that's the real individual part. That's the bit that makes you you, So I can't feed that into you or force that into you, but it's the bit that we can all do, and it's having just that kind of oomph within yourself to just do that with any kind of piece of music, so whether it's you're playing a bit of Bach or marimba or a snare drum solo or a multi-piece, whatever it is, or coming across an instrument for the first time, you have permission to do this kind of thing. So it's all about, as I say, just getting that confidence to listen, to ask the questions, and even if you think it's an absurd question, I'll give you an example. I had finished a tin of chocolates over Christmas. Now my instinct was to throw the tin away, and then I thought, oh well, hold on a second. Could I use this as a shaker? Or could I use this as a Foley sound, something that's useful for Foley purposes? Or what would happen if I put it on top of a gigantic timpani, And lo and behold, this tin, became such an interesting sound source for me. So it wasn't about, techniques or anything like that. It was purely how useful is this sound, or are these sounds? And I felt that actually this could be quite useful for me. So lo and behold, that tin went on the shelf.
Nice. Well, it's interesting what you were saying earlier and now about playing and how your approach, because it reminds me of what Jacob Collier said when I interviewed him about it. Sounded his approach, what I was getting from what he was saying was it's very playful. I mean, it's not rigid at all. And I know there have been times in my life where I've been very rigid about my practice, and it's been more recently that I'm able to relax and not put the pressure on myself or judge myself as much. And so like I start, and this is could kind of bridge into my business, but I decided to put creativity first because it's so easy to get caught up in the emails and all of the communication, marketing, all those things. But I decided, okay, after I take care of those basic things, I'm going to compose and write, and that also goes to listening to myself. I found that like one day it wasn't flowing. I was doing it, and I could feel it. And so I just walked away from it, and instead of trying to force it and continue to do it, and then the next day it might flow more. But anyway, the business side, when did that become something that you realized this should be a focus for you?
Oh, I think immediately. I think as soon as I became a student, it was something that was completely apparent to me. Because I didn't have any instruments, in the halls of residence that I was living in, or in the flats in London that I was living in, or anything like that. And there was only one percussion room at the academy at that time. This is in the mid 80s. And so, you had nothing else but to divide your time. You couldn't just walk into the room and expect, the instruments to be available for you, because there were other people, also wanting to do that. So really, a lot of it was about organizing your time. So if you only had access to that room between 8 and 9 in the morning, or 11 and 12, or 3 to 4 or something like that, then that's what you would do. And then what do you do the rest of your time? And what are you? So a big question for me was, well, what are you? Are you a percussion player? Are you a musician? Are you a sound creator? What are you? And so for me, as all of those things, all of those things mattered equally. And because the whole academy was full of sound creators, and there happened to be about 11 people who created sound through percussion, and God knows about maybe 80, 90 people who created sound through the piano, and maybe 50 through the voice, and 200 through the violin, or whatever it might be. But we were all sound creators at the end of the day.
Mm.
And then things like, if you did have money that you had to last and take care of over a term, that is business. So I remember in my first year, I really wanted to buy the music of the Paul Creston Marimba Concertino. Now, to buy the piano reduction and solo part cost something like £120. Now, in the mid 80s, this was an enormous amount of money, and certainly for a student, for one piece of music. So it took me the whole term to save up for that one piece of music, in order to make the money last for me to buy food each week, and to pay for the accommodation, and other things, other books and stuff that were needed for your degree. So that is, a teeny aspect of managing your money and so on, and just being stalwart in how you want that little pot to go and what you're going to spend it on. And then even things like buying instruments. Well, so what's the first thing that you are absolutely going to need, in order for, if, for example, if you're asked to play in an amateur orchestra, for your bus fare there and back again, so no fee as such, but your travel expenses. So what might a handy instrument be for you to try to save up for? So it could be something like a really good, nice tambourine, something that the best you can afford at that time. And I remember one piece of advice my dad gave me when I was little. He said, just take care of the things that you buy or are given to you. Take care of them. And I had my first pair of drumsticks, I have my first snare drum, and I have my first practice pad. And I take care of them. I take care of everything. And they have lasted, basically. So that's another teeny bit of the business, So building up just things that are pertinent to you as the percussion player, musician, and sound creator. And then, of course, a lot of what you do is getting on with people. So it's really that teamwork and how you converse with people. How reliable are you? So turning up on time, being prepared, just being absolutely, yep, I know exactly what I'm doing, and giving you the space, enough time and space to then help other people if need be, but make sure that you've got yourself catered for, and you're organized yourself. So that's all about listening to yourself, so that you're mentally and physically right, off we go, kind of thing. So, I mean, those are just basic things, of course. But when you turn up with an orchestra as a solo player, you have never met the conductor before. You're playing a brand new piece of music in a hall that you've never performed before. You have 3 hours to put this piece of music together. If that isn't about teamwork, chemistry, listening to each other, respecting each other, being prepared, being organized, turning up well ahead of time so you're absolutely ready to go at whatever time the rehearsal is. That's really important. And all of those little elements, building blocks, will be a big part in whether the promoter asks you back again. If you're late, if there's a hassle with the equipment, if something, that could be avoidable, has happened, then the likelihood is that they'll struggle, to want you back. So those are really basic things to think about.
And then also how what when did you or what would you do to get the word out when you started to have projects or something that you were uh, um, producing? How would you early on communicate with people?
Well, I was very lucky in that I had an agent. As soon as I graduated, an agent was ready to take me on. Now, this was so unusual for percussion. It had never happened before for a solo percussion player. And the agent was interesting. It was a small agency in London, but they were very interesting because, unlike some of the agents thereafter that basically tried to slot you in the same way as a violinist or a pianist or something like that. To manage a percussion player is a different kind of thing. It's important for people to know the repertoire, but important for them to know the whole logistical aspect, the physical aspect of being a percussion player. So you're going to arrive much earlier, you're going to have equipment, one thing or another, or if the equipment is hired, there's going to be different kinds of conversations there. And so this agency was very good at that. So basically, they created a lot of projects. However, having said all of that, it was extremely important for me, I felt, to be in control of my own journey, because what sometimes happens is that you just let the agency do everything and then you just kind of turn up. However, for me, I definitely felt that I needed to be really very much in control of the types of projects, of what I was doing, how they were going to happen, and so on. It sounds as though I'm a bit of a control freak, but that's hopefully not truly the case. But in those early days, it was very important. A little example of that was that EMI, the record company, asked if I would be interested in making a recording, and I felt I was very appreciative of the invitation, of course. And most people would say, "Oh yeah, wow, that's amazing. Yes, I will do that." For me, I just felt that it was too early. I didn't feel ready to do that, and so I declined. And my agent was kind of, but you've got to say yes. And I said, it was too early, basically. So then about a year, 2 years or so went by, and BMG then offered me a contract, and it felt right then. Those 2 years, just for me to build experience, giving concerts, repertoire, you name it, that was what I needed. So that was a case of, again, listening to yourself, what feels right at this particular moment, and really being true to that. And I think that if I had done the EMI thing, I think I would have regretted it, to be honest. I don't think it would have been a recording I would have been proud of, or, I'm always very critical of the things that I do, but it's a different kind of criticism, really.
Yeah. Do you and have you always tried to keep it to one project, or do you just focus on one project and then move on? How do you keep your focus?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the projects can definitely overlap without a doubt. Yeah, that's just the way it sometimes goes. It could certainly be where I could concentrate on one thing at a time. However, I think that the projects can sometimes be so diverse, and also the timings of the projects. So a little example of that is about a year and a half ago, I did a project for Spitfire, which is an audio sample company. And I've always been against doing that. However, this was the proposition was slightly different. And I thought, actually, I feel ready to do this now. Now, that was a project that required a certain amount of discussion and then something like 3 or 4 days in a studio. and then it's over to Spitfire to then do what they need to do with all of that material. So I don't have to do anything. So that's a project whereby it doesn't take too much time, and then you can do other things over and above. Or if it's, again, last year, at the end of last year, I was writing the music for a documentary about elephants in Thailand. So again, that needed a certain amount of time. However, other projects could weave in and out of that time. So I think that it is possible. I think the danger lies with the amount of performances and the amount of repertoire that's needed to be learned. So I've definitely thinned that out to quite a degree, because for years it was one piece, then that just all kind of stacked up like a pack of cards, and it was an awful lot of new notes to learn. And I think when COVID came, it was suddenly, my God, I don't have to learn a single note if I don't want to. And it was such a relief for a while. It really was. And coming out of COVID, I feel that, yeah, I just want a certain amount of new pieces per season, but not to have this kind of conglomerate, almost just like a basket full of linen, that you have to get washed. And no, I don't want to be there again.
Do you feel like at the time it was necessary to have so many this project and another overlapping?
Yes. Yes, because you had to know your limit, and everybody's different. And it's so important to just see where that limit is. And then once you feel that, once you feel it, it's just literally zoom out, just step back from the situation. And, as I say, I just sat down at the kitchen table with the diary and then just started reading. Obviously I did the things that I was contracted to do and promised to do in one thing or another. But thereafter, absolutely, I took each invitation and said, what difference can I make with this project?
Yeah.
What can I give to this project?
What do you recommend for people when they feel maybe they've taken on too much and they're kind of overloading their bandwidth?
Yep, it's just, recognizing that, which is really important, and that's a positive thing. And then, just saying to somebody, whether it's your family or your mentors or whoever you're in close connection with, just to say, right, I'm kind of, getting on the overload spectrum here, and I just need to kind of reorganize things and allow some bellows into what I'm doing. And if that means, really cutting back on the emails and how you respond and this kind of thing, cutting back on social media, how much time you spend on that, cutting back on certain things, almost like a diet in a way, and really being quite kind of stalwart about it. It always feels as though you're being quite selfish about it, and you're kind of thinking, oh, it's all about me, me, me. But actually, it is so important. It's for your own well-being, in every sense.
Yeah, and if you're in a place where you're taking care of your well-being, you're in a place where you're better able to take care of someone else or be there for someone else.
Absolutely right. And the longevity of things, it's a longevity of not just what you do, but your relationships, if you're not happy within yourself, this will kind of feed through in the things that you do. So, just being comfortable, and I don't mean that in a kind of, oh, lazy sort of way, but just, just feeling absolutely I'm on that good, positive scale. That's really, really good to be.
Yeah. What are some creative projects that you're excited about now?
Well, my goodness, well, one that I'm always excited about is when I'm dealing with the collection, which is officially called the Evelyn Glennie collection. And simply because, we've had for the past 6 years, wonderful volunteers work so hard on that. And they just bring such incredible energy into this place. They really do. And this collection is dealing with all sorts of things to do with the journey, from the musical scores to the instruments to the clothes to the photographs, to all of the recordings and the DVDs and the interviews, to the correspondence, to magazines, newspapers, reviews, previews, you name it, it is kind of in there, and it's all being organized So we're hoping that this year we can create a bespoke database so that it begins to be open to the public. So this is a long term project, but something that I feel that this year we can move forward because we stalled on the database once COVID started. Because, as I say, it's a big investment, and with everything being more or less flattened with COVID, it was too risky to go down that route. So there you go, a business decision. So 2 years later, we're hoping to get that going this year. And I'm just literally in the initial stages of forming the Evelyn Glennie Foundation. And that again is a long-term thing whereby hopefully this can carry on once I'm long gone, and help support all sorts of projects to do with listening. So for example, the first one that we're supporting is the stage text for some performances of Shakespeare's plays close to where we live. And this has doubled in cost since COVID, and the organisation can't afford it. But the stage text in these performances are so crucial, not just for deaf people, but for kids and for adults as well. And the poll has shown that children really do, enjoy having that and seeing the text above the actual stage of the performance. So we're helping to support that. And so the inclusiveness of what the foundation will support is absolutely key. That listening is inherent to everybody. Every demographic, every color, race, religion, you name it. It is absolutely paramount to how we all glue with each other. How we come together with each other.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that sounds like some great projects. I was curious about, uh, was there a moment, maybe an epiphany, where you realized your mission?
Well, that's a really interesting question. There wasn't really a moment as such. I think it's all kind of morphed into getting to this point, and who knows where this point will morph. How that will be, let's say, in 20 years' time. I can have a vision, but who knows? I mean, who knew that COVID would come about, and how that threw us all up in the air, and we've all kind of landed and kind of thought, oh, where am I, sort of thing. And I think for me, the when I was 12 years old, starting percussion, and my percussion teacher at school asked me to put my hands on the wall of the room in order to feel the vibration. I guess that was the start of listening in a very personalized way. And then when I started giving master classes, I found that what I was actually doing was I'm asking people to ask questions of themselves, so that they become their teachers, they become the explorers and the adventurers and be the curious person. And that's a form of listening, very much so. And then I discovered that as I've been asked to give speaking engagements and being involved in all sorts of things, that actually listening seemed to be the thread running through everything that everybody does, whether it's a domestic dispute or how people function in an office, and all sorts of things. Ultimately, it's about listening and communication and how something is put forward. So I think it's just kind of all morphed into this. And when you switch on the TV and you watch the news, well, they're not listening, and people talking over with each other, and they're not giving time to just listen to a message or a sentence, or or the vocabulary used, and how the body language is. It can be so destructive, and we're seeing so much of this on our TV from our leaders and one thing or another, and we're thinking, oh crumbs, what hope is there for the world? But we, as a collective, give that hope. We will give that hope because, we feel that what we do matters, and when we zoom out of all of this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking with me, and thank you for doing the work you're doing. It,
Pleasure.